Well, hello, everyone. Thank you guys for joining us for this webinar. We're going to be talking about building a committed and effective launch team. I love that you're a part of this with us. This is going to be interactive. We're going to give you time in a few minutes if you have questions to toss those out for us to discuss. A couple things I want to let you know as we're getting started. First of all, if you haven't, drop in the chat. Tell us what church you're from or what city you're from, what part of the country you're from. And I would love to see why you were interested in this webinar. So feel free to share that as well. For those of you who it's your first time on a webinar with us, I'm Matt Johnson. I'm lead pastor at Journey Church. We're located in Murray, Kentucky. There were 7 of us who started our church back in 2005. We were set up and tear down every week for 16 years and then built the facility that we are in now here in Murray. And I'm also part of the ICN Church Planner Coaching Program. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but it's been exciting to get to work with church planners around the country and North America. But you're in for a treat today because I've got my good buddy Matt Brown with us. Matt is an incredible guy. He is a tremendous leader, and he has a real heart for church planners. So I'm going to interview him for the next 20 minutes or so. And then after that, anytime throughout the interview, you want to throw questions in. If you hear Matt say something, you'd like to hear more about it, feel free to throw those in the chat because then we'll take some Q&A time after the interview. Matt, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for doing this. Why don't you start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself and Lifehouse and your involvement, not just in starting Lifehouse, but now working with church planners.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt, and appreciate you. And it's an honor to be with everybody else. Yeah, I'm married to Tina, my wife, for 32 years now. I want to make sure I get that right. And we have done ministry together for pretty much full time for 32 years, which has been an honor to do that too. We have 4 adult children. Our youngest is 25. And we started Lifehouse 18 and a half years ago in Van Wert, Ohio. We're in a rural setting. Our town's about 10,000 people. And we started portable. We were portable for 2 years. And then after 2 years, we were able to rent the facility we were in. And 10 years in, we bought a strip mall in town with a big anchor grocery store, and we renovated that and repurposed it. And we've been there ever since. We've been part of the ICN network for, I think, 13 years, which literally was one of the best decisions we ever made. We just needed help as we were growing as a young church. So I'm super grateful for this network and been doing this planning and coaching initiative with you and the team for just the last couple of years. So it's just really good to be here.
Well, it's great to have you, and you're not going to say this, but I'll say it for you. Matt has done a remarkable job at building a team of leaders there in Van Wert, Ohio. They are reaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You're over 1,000 in attendance. It's about 10% of your town comes to your church. It is unbelievable what's happened there. But I want to take you all the way back to the beginning, Matt. This is the first question every church planner wants to know, which is, all right, I need some people to help me. How do I recruit a launch team to start a church? Talk through some of the most effective ways that you are seeing to connect with people. Give them some tips or some insight that'll help them, especially when they get out of their immediate circle. That's when it starts to get hard. So talk through how you think about that.
Yeah, I think something that's really helpful is just have a mentality of hustle. That you're just going to have to hustle and you have to work hard at it. It seems obvious, but you got to get in the community any way you can. We were having a conversation with a church planner, and he genuinely said, "I've asked everybody I know." And I think you said to him, Matt, then you need a different barber. You need to go to different restaurants. You need to find, places where kids are having sports, your kids are involved, and meet parents and just find people that you've not talked to along the way yet. If you're still young enough, play golf, play in a basketball league, rub shoulders, whatever your thing is, get in the middle of that and invite people with it. I just was thinking through this. Any chance you get to ask leaders in your community to join you, don't miss that opportunity because, when you're starting something like this, you need leaders, you need smart, strong people. But if you're going to be in the middle of those environments, you got to have a good, strong pitch. And it seems a little cheesy, but you have to have a good elevator pitch, something that you can share in a minute with someone that's somewhat clear so they catch what you're talking about. And then, of course, the longer pitch is over coffee. but it's usually something that's well thought out that when you get the opportunity, you can share that. And somewhere along the line, you're going to build a launch team or a core team, and then you got to compel them to join you in the process of inviting people. And it's hard for some people. They want to serve, but they don't want to have to make the ask. And I think making the ask and having the boldness to make a strong ask is pivotal for sure.
Oh, that's really good. I want to follow up real quick before we move on, because you mentioned something about leaders in your community. And I find oftentimes church planners do not reach out to the leaders of their community and build a relationship. You have any insight there on the value of that or how to go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pivotal that you're not the isolated good leader, and hopefully you're a good leader, which we're just making that assumption. But to have other people that can carry responsibility, be a think tank in decision making, is really important. And I would just say this, that leaders want to lead. So if you invite them to do just a small thing or something that's not pivotal in their mind, they may not think it's worth their time. Leaders want to lead, so when you invite them, have something for them that's substantial and matters to them along the way.
Yeah, that's great advice. And even I've found, Matt, even the leaders who aren't ready or it's not the right time for them to engage with your church, if they see you have a well thought through plan and you make a great impression on them, they will loan you credibility in the community. They will talk positively about you, which is one of the things you need most is that credibility. All right, so let me jump off of what you were saying there. So as church planners, listen, we're all so desperate just to get people to help us get this thing started that sometimes we'll take any warm body. If they're breathing, it's like, come on. But over the years, what we have learned is you got to have some key values and non-negotiables you are looking for when you're at least selecting those core launch team members, the ones, as you say, who are going to help lead and carry some of the weight. Talk through what you think about there and what you coach church planners on now.
Yeah, I think a really obvious answer to start with is you want people that follow Jesus. And that's, if their journey's brand new, they follow Jesus, that's great. If they're mature in their journey following Jesus, that's great, but they have to follow Jesus. And obviously that's, his death and his resurrection. That's kind of the foundation of our faith. But I would just suggest looking how people live as they follow Jesus. Because there's a lot of people that are Christians, and we all know this, we see this, that want to be right about stuff. You want Jesus followers that want to make a difference. And the religious world is full of people that want to be right. We need to model Jesus the way he lived and forgave and loved and served, because that's what it's going to take to get, something as difficult as planting a church off the ground. It's that tension of can people come alongside you and have truth and grace along the way. So that's the main filter I would lean into. Then I think about Lencioni's hungry, humble, and smart analogy. I think that's super helpful because I think if you have people that come alongside you that are humble and you invite them in, they'll get on board. And the questions I put down around that is, are people teachable that are going to have influence in your organization? And as I thought about people around Jesus, I thought about Peter and how unteachable he was for so long because he wasn't very humble until the cross broke him. But after the resurrection, he was willing to do whatever Jesus said for the most part. Versus if you invite someone that wants to be the master teacher, the master theologian, and they want to have the spotlight or they want to have all the fame, that can be really dangerous. So when I think about it, I think I want mature followers of Jesus. Even if they're new, I want them to be more mature than just knowledgeable or have all the answers or be right about everything. So yeah, that's important. And I would say this in the early days of Lifehouse, as more people came, especially when other churches would splinter and because we were the new exciting thing, people wanted to bring what they wanted. Like this is what we expect and this is what we desire. This is the way they did it in the church I grew up in. And we had to come back to, hey, if you're not going to be humble, you're not going to have a say in what's going on here. It was really important. One last
Well,
thing on humility, that being strong and being humble are not at odds. And sometimes I forget that. You can be humble, but you can be a fire-breathing, leader at the same time, and that's a big deal. So,
I'm going to put you on the spot here, but you mentioned a tension that I think every church planner runs into which is the people, you always have some people who were a part of another church who are wanting to come now help you. Um, and I would say there is a right type of disgruntled or not content with my old church, and there's a wrong type. To your point, there's the wrong type that they're motivated by getting more power or control or being the master theologian or the master whatever. And then there's the type that's just like, I'm not, we're not reaching people. Our approach is not connecting with people far from God, and that's where their discontent comes from. Can you talk any more about that? Just give me your thoughts on how you filter and evaluate the discontent that a Christian might have, and whether they will then be a good fit for your church plant.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. When people complain that are Christians, do they complain about stuff that they want, or do they complain about the fact we're not reaching the people we should be reaching? And if someone comes to me and says, and I don't do this right all the time, but if someone comes to me, I want to have the filter of, if your complaint is if someone walks in the door and they're not welcomed or loved or they don't understand our language, that's a really good complaint. If it's you're not getting the music you want or whatever the old arguments are, that's not a complaint we're going to jive with. And we may, and this is controversial, but we may help you find a way to exit our church. And it's hard for me sometimes to do that lovingly, but it's important to do that lovingly and be kind. But if you're going to complain about the wrong things, we don't have time for that. Our mission's too important and too strong.
Well, Matt, that hits on something that's core to this, which is every church planter, and quite honestly, every lead pastor has to clearly and consistently communicate the vision. Here's what we're trying to accomplish and why we're trying to do it and how we're going to go about it. Talk a little bit about in a church planter setting when they're building a launch team, how do they communicate that vision in a way that builds some ownership and engagement and clarity, deep commitment for those launch team members?
Yeah, I think for me, it's super helpful to paint a picture of what we're trying to accomplish. And the picture I have painted for a long time, and I've borrowed this from different people, is we want to be an outward facing church. And it's easy to say that. But the picture I love to paint is if your 19-year-old son decides to try church for the first time or is about ready to give up on church and is going to attend for the last time, what environment do you want him to walk into? And if, if you're a parent that loves your kid, you want him to walk in or her to walk into a place that cares about them and loves them and will think about them being in the room before they think about all the insiders that already know Jesus or are walking with him in the room. And for some reason, that's just compelling. You could say it to a grandparent about their grandkids. You could talk about your brother that's 19. And this is what we want to create from digital media. Andy talked about that last month to the 4 events that we do in the community, all the way to when they drive up in the parking lot and someone appropriately pays attention to them, but not too much attention because they don't want to be overwhelmed, to the fact the guy on stage has recognized they might be new here and uses appropriate language that they understand and that everybody understands.
No, that's really helpful. You are putting you're helping that team member to see what you're trying to do through the eyes of somebody else, the person you're trying to reach.
Yeah.
That can bring a lot of clarity. Would you recommend, because one of the things we hear a lot, Matt, we ran into this. We would get launch team members who use the same language as us, but come to find out once we launched the church, they define that language differently than we did. So they thought we were going to do A and we did B instead. Um, Talk through a little bit as you're casting that vision. I know one of the things you guys do now with volunteers, and we do as well, is we will take them to churches that are doing things ahead of us, but like we want to do it and let them see it. Do you find value in that for a church planner? To be able, if you can find a church that's doing something similar to what you're trying to create, what's the value in making some trips on a Sunday, taking the group, letting them begin to experience it somewhere else?
Well, our story is that story exactly. Because 4 years into it, felt like we'd stumbled into something really good, but we didn't know how to do it well from a system standpoint. And when we connected to North Point and the ICN network, it was clear the things that we were missing. I mean, like immediately clear that we're not doing these things well. In fact, we made the mistake of thinking of kids' environments as childcare. And what you find real fast is, kids' environments is an engine for a church to grow, whether it's a church plant or, any church along the way. And so seeing that just brought such clarity to it. And then to bring that back, you state the solution back to my 19-year-old son. The problem is there's not a lot of churches that are thinking about him. They're thinking about the people that are already here. And then you just get to say, we get to be the solution to that problem in this community. That when your grandson needs a place to go, he can come here and we will bend over backwards. And seeing it in other places helps so much. So,
Yeah, that's good. All right, a couple more questions for you, and then we'll do some Q&A. So if y'all are watching and you want to drop a question in for Matt, do that in the chat. Matt, one of the things that I think is really key in the early stages is building a healthy team culture among that launch team, because the culture of that launch team is going to get reproduced in your early church. It's really hard for that not to happen. Talk through how you think about creating a culture that's going to model and foster things like unity or accountability or spiritual growth. How do you do that before your church even launches?
yeah, I think just to be as clear as you possibly can from the get-go. This is what we want to be, and this is where we want to go. And the old saying, if it's misty in the pulpit, it's foggy in the pew. And it's an old statement, but it's true. So it has to be super clear in the lead pastor's mind, so it's clear for everybody else. Real quick story. In the early days, we actually had one of our leadership team members. The guy had influence in our church. He was clear about us reaching people until we got to about 200 people. And when we got to 200 people, he thought, no, okay, now we've gotten big enough. We don't need to reach any more people. And he became a huge problem because I didn't make it clear along the way. We were thrilled to get to 150 people. So I was like, yeah, it's just working. At 200 people, he imploded because I forgot to be clear along the way. Um, so I think part of that clarity, and this is not a strength of mine, you're actually really good at this, is creating systems ahead of time so there's processes to move forward. I lead a little more instinctively, so I sometimes forget about systems like job descriptions, stated wins in each environment, whether it's kids or programming or guest services, whatever you call that, and making sure, on paper, there's the why and what the win is along the way. And I think when you have that, even when you got the perfect systems, you still have to course correct. People can get off track, and you have to have conversations about bringing them back to center, hoping you can pull that off. I would say for me, a few of the mistakes I made along the way is I had to course correct, which I don't have a problem doing. But I probably, if I'd had better systems, I wouldn't have been so hard on people to get them back on track, if that makes sense.
Well,
So.
would you agree, Matt? It's harder to have those conversations if you didn't set clear expectations on the front end. So to your point, if the win's not clear on the front end, then there's no reference point. You're having to introduce the win once people ran in a direction they thought was okay to run. That's part of what makes that hard, isn't it?
It really is. But to be clear, though, even if you have a perfect statement and clarity and systems, some people still get off track. I ask our staff, when you have to confront someone about behavior, whether it's toxic or just misaligned, I need you to do it face to face. This is really hard these days. For me too. We're not doing phone calls, and we're not doing text messages or emails. You got to sit down with someone and look them in the eye and say, listen, I need you to come back to center in these moments. So yeah, it's been a
That,
healthy culture for us in that way.
that's great advice. Okay, common pitfalls. You have gone through this yourself. You have helped a lot of church planners in different ways over the years. Common pitfalls when building a launch team, and any thoughts on how you either avoid them or correct them if you're in the middle of them now.
Yeah. I just made a list of knots that cause pitfalls for me, and what I've seen is not being bold along the way. Whether you're asking in the beginning or in a bold ask when you're trying to get equipment and pay for stuff, whatever it might be, you got to be bold. Not being clear. We've talked about that. Andy Stanley's book, Making Vision Stick, is such a helpful guide to that. It was for me along the way. Not being willing to address toxicity or misaligned people. We talked about that. We haven't talked about this, not being excited I think when you're the lead guy or on the launch team, you got to be the most excited person on your team. We call it being the director of awesomeness on our team. That if you're in charge of Kids World, you're the director of awesomeness in Kids World. And it doesn't mean you fake it or you're not authentic, but you got to realize you're asking people to volunteer their time that work full time and give money to something that they could go on a vacation with. And so if they're going to do that, I have to be more excited than them about it every time they show up and I show up. Being willing to make the hard asks. And last one was not being decisive. I see this a lot with leaders in general. When you're planning a church, you got to make decisions along the way. And I'm not saying this is the perfect prayer for this, but for me, it was Jesus, I'm going to run through that door. And I got some wise counsel along the way. If this is a bad decision, I need you to slam the door in my face. But we've got to move and we got to move fast because people don't want to wait around. They want to be a part of something. You have to go at an appropriate speed, but you still got to make decisions along the way.
Oh, that's good. Any other recommendations or final thoughts before we jump into a couple questions?
Yeah, maybe the simplest one. It's kind of where we started this whole thing. When you do this, there's going to be a million things to do and a million decisions and raising money and getting people to show up. Don't forget that you're doing something with Jesus and you're leading people to Jesus. We're kingdom of heaven on earth. And sometimes we just forget this because there's so many distracting and discouraging things. But when you keep that at the core and you remember that's where we're taking people, it's not just about the music and the lights and all the cool stuff. It's Jesus. It's kept me center for the most part along the way.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, I got a couple questions to throw your way in a second. Before I do, let me let you guys know about a couple of things coming up. One is we have another webinar coming June 19th. It's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern. It is on 3 critical mistakes to avoid when planting a church. It's going to be really helpful content from a church planter, now lead pastor out in South Carolina. So we'd love for you to be a part of that. You can go to irresistible.church/webinars and sign up for that today. The other thing I will mention is, so Matt Brown is part of the group of people who helped build this church planner coaching program that ICN is rolling out. And this program equips church planters with all the things that Matt's talking about. Equips church planters and helps coach them through how to develop the wins, the systems, the strategies, how to communicate vision well, how to build a launch team. We go deep into all of that stuff. It's a 3-year coaching program. As a church planter, you have a cohort that you're a part of church planners. You also have a one-on-one coach. Matt's one of our one-on-one coaches. So you get this opportunity to have community, to be around people who are planning just like you, and to be around some experienced church planners. It works really well. So if you want to learn more about it, get a little more info, have a conversation around it, you can go to irresistible.church/church-plant, and you can see info about that and how to get in touch with us there. All right, Matt, I want to toss a couple of questions your way. First of all, what do I do with core team members that aren't fully bought into the vision?
Yeah. I was just thinking about that idea. I think one of the things that helps bring people into alignment is celebrating the right wins. That idea of what's rewarded is repeated. So the right win isn't just a good event. The right win isn't just, like we said, good music or whatever it might be. It's, hey, I saw someone that needed Jesus show up to whatever we were doing. And then to celebrate that in a way that's inspiring and just do it over and over and over. And when people want to celebrate other things, to appropriately, gently, maybe just go, okay, fine, and dismiss that and come back to what matters most. Sometimes it is a hard conversation. Like, this is what we started around. This is where we're going. We're not deviating, and letting people choose. Not, and again, the temptation is you want lots of people and you need some money to make it happen. But to watch a name and a checkbook walk out of your church to another church sometimes just as necessary.
Well, that's great advice. And to piggyback off what you said earlier about this, I think figuring out what the core resistance issue is for them, and a lot of times, if you can connect the mission and vision of what you're trying to do to them personally, if you can connect it to their 19-year-old son or grandson or whatever the case may be, that will break down the resistance a lot of times. I've also at times seen you do have to take them somewhere else and be like, okay, I'm going to take you and show you what we're trying to do. I've explained all the whys. You still can't envision it. Let me take it in another church and show you. And then it's clear to them and they can opt in or opt out. But your point about making it personal for them, I think is incredible. All right, next question. How would you get more involved with your community if you were bivocational and you were limited to only, 3 nights per week that you could be out in the community? Bivocational pastors are the heroes of the church world anyway. So my grandfather was bivocational for 50 years as a pastor. So I have seen this. You guys are incredible. Matt, give some advice because I think it's doable. We've got bivocational church planners we're coaching now, right? So give some advice to that.
I think a simple answer is just make it part of the rhythm that you're already living in. So if you got little kids that are playing t-ball, there's a whole, set of parents there and grandparents that you can find ways to have conversations in. If you are bivocational, I mean, where you work is a place to harvest that up. And then I think it just takes some hustle and creativity to use your time wisely, to cover some other areas. I've not been bivocational very much in my ministry career, so I'm not the expert on this by any means.
Well, I think that's good advice. I also think sometimes we underestimate how much we can leverage simple things, whether you're in a job where you get a lunch break and you stack those lunch breaks with, 30-minute lunches with people that you're wanting to talk to. The rhythm of your normal life is a good one. I also think, Matt, you've done a great job of this. You have to be strategic in terms of who you're connecting with as well. And when you're bivocational, when I say be strategic, I mean, are these people going to add a lot of value in terms of credibility if they buy into what we're doing? Or are these the kind of people who will buy in and then they will help me find other people? That's who you've got to invest in. You can't spend a ton of time, can't spend months trying to convince somebody to come on the team. You got to find the people who are bought into it. That's a big one. Let me throw this question at you. What steps or systems should I put into place before we launch that would help everyone get clarity around the same vision for the church plant?
Yeah, I think I think we mentioned this, the wins for each of your environments is super helpful because people will go in their own direction if that's not in place. I think, and I don't know if this fits in this category, is you just have to have enough people to begin. You have to figure out for us to launch in a healthy way, we got to make sure we have a launch team of 50 people because we talk about this all the time. 150 people will show up the first day, your 3x number, and then it's going to drop significantly the next Sunday. So the system of just making sure you built your core team to be big enough or launch team to be big enough is pretty important. And all those people have to serve, so you have enough people in your launch team to serve and to pay the bills. That's just the business part of this.
Yeah, that's good. In our coaching program, we talk about the systems you mentioned. We talk about strategy. It's important to have a clear strategy. If you come into your church plant with a clear strategy, you're teaching your team, even if you have to tweak or change the strategy, you're at least all on the same page when you start. I think that's really important. We talk through Sunday morning systems, like what's the framework for our Sunday morning services? Otherwise, you're going to have creatives who have 12 different ideas and your services are going to, they're going to run all over the place. We do the same thing with kids ministry. We do the same thing in terms of volunteers. How do we recruit and train volunteers? Some of those basic systems, the more of those you can have in place on the front end, even if you have to change them. I just think it's a fact that even if the plan you have or the system you have is not perfect, if everybody is bought into it, you can go further faster. That's what you're getting at there, which I think is terrific. You also touched on another question that came in. I want you to elaborate on this a little bit. The question was, how many people do I need to have on my launch team? And you talked about some of the tensions around that, Matt. Can you elaborate a little more on how to think about that?
Yeah, I think context can be a little different depending on where you are. And more rural, you may not need quite as many people as you would in a metropolitan area, but you still don't want to show up too short with it. So if you think whatever your number is going into your first launch Sunday, it probably will be 3x that Sunday, but it drops way down. So the second Sunday, what's sustainable for you? What is it going to take to run your kids' world and your guest services? Because as you said, a great system is, you know, people in the parking lot to park cars. That just shows people we were expecting you this morning. But if you don't have enough people to park cars and, you know, greet and run production, that's problematic. So I think we talk about the minimal number on your launch team, around 50 to 60 people is a pretty good minimum. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say think through how many volunteers do I need to create the experience we need to create, that the term we use, Matt, is irresistible. The
Mhm.
experience we need to create that will be so helpful and so engaging that people want to come back and bring a friend. Um, Whatever that number is, okay, well, now you know what you have to have on your launch team, right? And to your point, if I heard you right, you can just figure if you had 50 people on your launch team, you're going to have 125 to maybe 150 people at your first service. But then over the course of the month, we know all those people, some of them are just, it's curiosity seekers. They're not all going to stay. You could drop by as much as 50%. So you also have to make sure that when you settle in, you got enough people in the room that it doesn't feel like a circle of 12 and singing Kumbaya, right? There's a sense of critical mass there.
Yeah, and I think even making sure your team knows that journey is going to happen. It's gonna look larger and then you're gonna shrink just a little bit or a lot of it, and then that's where you grow from. To prepare them for that's important.
Okay. One more thing. I thought this would be interesting. Um, let me let me give you a case study, okay? And let's just talk through on the fly pros and cons of this. The question was, we plan to send some of our main campus people, so it sounds multi-site, to a new small church. So a new small church is launching, I assume, for a period of 6 to 12 months until the community begins to attend that church. So the current attendance of the new church is about 20 a week. So in essence, they're like, here's a church that doesn't have critical mass. For 6 to 12 months, we're going to send people from our church over there to help them get critical mass and begin to build momentum. And then they'll come back to our church. Um, Pros and cons, they say, of that approach. So what are, if you were in that situation, Matt, coaching the pastor or the church planner of that church of 20, let's talk about the things you would say, hey, you got to focus on this in the next 6 to 12 months. And the things you would say, you better watch out for this.
That's a great question. I think I would focus a ton on creating that vision for the 20 people that are there because they're got to be the ones that carry it and they're the ones in the community. So I would think about vision and who we're reaching. If it wasn't a church that did things with excellence, I would focus on, hey, let's figure out how to do this well because most churches, they don't have excellence on the mind. And so teach that 20 as that grows to do things well. I would probably say because I'm guessing this would be in place, let's revamp the kids world, the kids ministry, because with 20 people, there's probably not much of one. So let's create that engine with kids and possibly with students. That's just another big boulder to push. But if you could pull that off, the invite culture, I would be all over the invite culture. You know, we have 9 months to 12 months to invite as many people as we can, and they're going to come, and there's a mass group of people here. But before this mass leads, let's get another, 100 people in the door so it feels like something's happening in this place.
Yeah,
That
what that's great advice. What popped in my mind in terms of a danger was right off the bat, I thought, okay, well, if you have 20 people and let's say you're adding 50 to 100 to it, that's wonderful. But those 50 to 100 probably don't live in that community. They're probably not going to invite friends to that church. So you still have an invite problem, and you've got to make sure, as you were saying, that invite thing is scaled up. And then you can't pull all 50 to 100 of those people at once, because that's going to feel like the church gets cut in half or more the minute they all leave. So you got to figure out how to phase them out. That's a challenge because you're solving the critical mass problem for 6 to 12 months. You're making it feel better on Sunday mornings, but you've still got the issue of you don't have a deep enough core foundation of local people to sustain what you're trying to do in that 6 to 12 month period. That's, if I were the pastor of that church, That's what I would be lying awake every night thinking about is I have to, in essence, develop a large enough core. It replaces this core that this church just sent me. And that's a small time frame to do it. So there's definitely going to be some urgency there. But it's a unique way to think about it. And I'd be interested if, I don't know who asked the question, I didn't see, but I'd be interested if they doubled back and told us how they went a year from
I would
now.
love to hear it too.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right, listen, Matt, thanks. So
I,
go ahead. Yeah.
I love the word you used for that situation, urgency. And I think urgency is an important word through this whole process. So that's a great word to have in your mind.
Well, that's a great final word. I appreciate you sharing with us. That was some incredibly helpful stuff to think through. Thanks for being willing to give your time. Let me remind all you guys real quickly again, join us for the next webinar, June 19th, 3 critical mistakes to avoid. Looking forward to that. Look forward to joining you on that. By the way, if you found this helpful, share this with some friends that you know that are in church planning or considering this as well. Help us spread the word about what we're doing here. And then finally, if you're interested in the church planner coaching program that Matt Brown is a part of, if you want to have a guy as smart as him coaching you one-on-one, go to irresistible.church/church-plant. You guys have a great rest of your day. We'll see you in June.